me see if I can evolution account for morality?
There you go.
Okay.
Well, okay, so before Frank gets deeper into his topic here, can evolution account for morality? Evolution can explain why morality is a major factor in the survival of the human species. Cultural evolution can explain why certain societies at certain points in time, have the social norms and the moral foundations that they do. So it's not as simple as can evolution explain morality or account for morality? It's more about how morality factors into the evolution of our species, how that helped us to survive, and none of that has anything to do with dictating what is good, bad, right, or wrong.
First of all, we need to point out that moral laws are not chemical or biological. They are immaterial and they come from personal agents. So there's no mutating genetic code that has any authority to tell you or me or anyone else how to behave, right?
I would agree with this sentiment that moral laws are not based on chemical or necessarily biological stuff. But, I mean, that's not what anybody says about evolution and morality. As I explained prior to this point, it has nothing to do with the chemical nature of DNA or anything like that. It's a very complex issue that has to deal with how societies form and evolve over time. And morality is just one particular factor in how our species was able to survive and thrive. So this first point here on Frank Turk's list just is a non sequitur. Nobody's talking about this particular point. Nobody is making this argument. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of Frank Turk and other apologists out there. And this is because they have to drive a narrative. This narrative that evolution is somehow supposed to be prescribing moral laws or is supposed to dictate what is and isn't moral, when in reality, if they were actually attacking the real argument that is being made on this evolution of morality idea, they really wouldn't have too much to say about it. Well, I mean, maybe Frank, he's a creationist, so, I mean, anything that deals with explaining our reality without God, he's instantly gonna come up with some kind of apologetic that circumnavigates around your intellect in order to try to convince you that you definitely need God for this basic ass shit. Basic ass shit. There's no corn in his shit nuggets.
Secondly, chemistry and biology are descriptive. They're not prescriptive. Evolution describes what does survive. It doesn't tell us what ought to survive. So why humans? Why not dolphins or roaches or kangaroos?
Hold on, I just need to check with my barometer real quick. Honey?
Yeah?
Kangaroos, cockroaches, and all these other animals that this fuck just listed still exist, right? Okay, thank you. What the fuck does this have to do with anything? This is yet again another non sequitur. Like, all of those animals still exist today. Also, nobody is arguing that evolution prescribes like these oughts, these moral oughts, like somebody ought to do this thing. Evolution is a description of how groups of organisms and organisms in general change over time due to environmental factors as well as other factors like sexual selection, natural selection, and all that. This is yet again another straw man, which ends up just being a non sequitur point. That's right, honey. He's a stupid bitch.
What Sam Harris is doing is he's smuggling a moral law into his system to get it to work.
Well, I'm not exactly sure exactly what the guy is talking about as far as Sam Harris goes. I do think that Sam Harris is trying to explain why morality exists and why morality is such a good thing to societies today without some kind of religious basis to it. That's what I think that he's trying to do. He's not trying to smuggle anything, and he's definitely not trying to say that evolution prescribes any kind of oughts or anything like that. He's just trying to explain how morality is factored into our continued survival.
Right? He's trying to assume that human beings are valuable and we ought to treat one another to promote human flourishing. Well, I generally agree with Sam Harris. That's what we ought to do.
Well, if my memory serves from reading The Moral Landscape, what Sam Harris is doing is he presents as a fundamental axiom the fact that we are thinking agents in our society. The end goal of having our species survive, in order to attain that end goal of doing that in your lifetime, then morality is inherently necessary, or at least this moral, having a good moral sense about you, or a moral sense that is cohesive with the society that you exist within. He's not saying that, oh, you know, we ought to do these things. He's saying, well, if we want to attain this goal, then you know, these are the things that should happen. So he's subjectively defining his foundation here, but I would say that Christians also subjectively define their foundation as God, because we don't have good evidence that God exists, and we have really good evidence that Frank Turk's God definitely doesn't exist.
But only a theist can justify that. He can't. Also, should we rape to survive? If survival is our end, as some evolutionists will say, then if we can propagate our genes by raping, why shouldn't we do that?
Yeah, you're right, honey. What the fuck? Obviously, you can make moral judgments, however subjective you want to consider them, about the act of raping somebody. It's very detrimental to the person that's being raped, and it violates their bodily autonomy, it violates their agency. So there are a lot of secular reasons as to why grape is wrong. But I would also like to point out how there are a lot of instances in the Old Testament where God seemingly approves of grape in one way or another. The entire system where the man pays for a woman is raping the woman. Like in the sexual aspect of being in a marriage or marrying somebody, if you're paying for that person and not getting their consent, then that is graping them. It's a form of sexual slavery. God obviously doesn't have a problem with grape. He doesn't have a problem prescribing grape in certain instances in order for his people to propagate and multiply, as he said in the Bible. There are other instances in the Bible, in the Old Testament laws, where God actually describes situations where a woman could get raped and also be forced to marry her rapist. Don't give me this high horse fucking argument about grape, Frank Turk, because if you look into your book that you hold in such high regard, you're not going to find God saying, hey, don't grape people. In fact, you've got God saying, hey, you know what? Purchase women with money and other goods and services, and then you can have sex with them, and you can have as many children as you can, and there you go. The entire chosen people, group of chosen people that are built off of grape, a society that promotes grape. Way to go, Frank.